I'm Ari Espy.
And my name is Katrina.
My name is Allison Chang. My pronouns are she, her.
My name is John Hugh. My pronouns are he, him, his.
Jessica Ng.
Annie Jimenez.
Hen. Pronouns he, him, his.
I am a Filipina American, proud to be one.
I am a first generation Chinese American.
I identify as Filipino. I'm
an Asian American.
I identify as she, her, and hers, and I am Dominican and Haitian American.
There are non-Asians on our squad that we consider family, and Arlene is one of
A
them.
mixed Asian American, Pacific Islander.
I'm Chinese American, which means that whenever shit happens in China, motherfuckers magically think I'm responsible for it.
I live in Orange County. In fact, I'm not too far from Disneyland.
Queens, New York.
I was born and raised in Queens, New York.
In Queens, I'm
Queens. I live in a very diverse part of Queens.
As the world's most culturally diverse corner of the world.
In the South Bronx in New York City.
In the Philadelphia area.
Pertinent identities and experiences.
I have very severe ADHD. I am also autistic.
Also queer.
I'm currently straight, so that's not useful.
Which means that I am generally the most socially inappropriate person in a room, sometimes except for Katrina.
My first major bout with racism was well before COVID-19 when I had moved upstate to Putnam County.
People just automatically assumed I was Chinese. When I was younger, didn't even know what the Philippines was. So they would keep asking me, where's the Philippines located? And I told them it's on a map. It's on the map, south of China. So it took me a while to realize they weren't serious with their question. They were just trying to make fun of me because I'm not Chinese,
I was one of the only few Asians in high school.
For being fat, for being Asian, for being autistic, although they never said that, it was just I was the socially awkward kid.
Been told by non-Asians that I am too Asian for them.
I would be exotified by non-Asian cis male students because of my tan skin and, well, yeah, it's just sad that Asian American women like to be exotified.
And I have often been told by Asians that I am not Asian enough.
Had to accept the fact that I was probably going to be messed with in some way, and knew that I shouldn't and couldn't take shit from anyone.
I have been fetishized, exoticized, and tokenized.
I would always get catcalled, and I'd always experience some type of sexism because of my gender and the way I look.
On my first day of school, literally straight out the gate, I had already been called a chink.
And I heard all kinds of different nasty remarks, whether it was slurs, mocking the accent, and this wasn't coming from just white folks. It was
being the city kid, I couldn't just allow that to slide. So on my first day of school, I had also gotten into my first fight. And the next 4 years were just full of racial slurs.
And they would do this in front of teachers, and especially substitute teachers. They realized they could get away with this shit.
I've had really bad customer service. People don't think I speak English for some reason. Thank you, Trader Joe's in Soho.
My friend, when we were in the 3rd grade, and she called me a chink. And she's not my friend anymore.
Racial slurs, a new one was daily. It was the new norm for me. Again, because I was the only Asian student in the school, there were white people going on Urban Dictionary to find something else to call me.
As Afro-Latinos, my brother has darker skin compared to mine, and we both have textured hair, seeing as we have the same father. We both grew thick skin over the past few years due to the anti-blackness we have encountered within our families.
I was constantly being tested, again, getting into fights every week. So next 4 years of my high school experience was all about fighting. I had to learn how to fight even before I took any type of formal class.
I still remember it as a child, getting into physical and verbal fights with kids who bullied my brother and getting into trouble because of it, and I will do it again.
So what would happen is that I would have a conversation with an Asian American woman, and sort of out of nowhere, they would be like, oh, by the way, I don't date Chinese guys. Oh, by the way, I don't date Asian guys. And that was just super confusing because I'm like, I'm not attracted to you. I'm attracted to her. Why are you telling me this? And by that, luckily, for everyone's sake, I knew by that time to not open my mouth. No, I'm kidding. I totally did, and that got me in trouble.
He would just make fun of my food. He hated my food, my country's food. He hated Filipino food. He would always put it down as unhealthy. Use it to fat shame me, and in general was not even interested in learning about my culture, which is part of who I am.
Parents, ironically, the same people that were bullying me in school, also were serving on the school board itself. And when I had put my formal complaints to the school that obviously had to go up to the school board, they were utterly ignored and fell on deaf ears.
Whenever race was brought up, or whenever there were studies that were looking for people of color, or just talking about diversity, I would kind of find out the hard way. It's like, yep, we mean people of color, but not you.
When I told my parents, I got a very typical Asian response, and my parents told me that I should just focus on my studies instead of essentially what people thought of me.
I didn't feel like the need to bring it up because I'm like, well, it's not like we're being killed because of it, so I'll just leave that alone. Of course, as you know, that sentiment would last about as well as a kid whose mom believes that vaccines cause autism.
Before the pandemic arrived, I worked as a receptionist at a hair salon in East Midtown. And as soon as the pandemic hit, with the former president pointing the finger and blaming it on China, I've overheard stylists to the salon manager that I worked under making sneaky racial remarks towards AAPI clients, making me uncomfortable.
We started seeing attacks, on Asian Americans by all kinds of non-Asians.
It was beyond heartbreaking to see Philadelphia's own Chinatown feel so empty during the first couple of months of 2020.
Right. Well, I think I saw it coming.
And what wasn't helpful was that people were either pretending that the attacks only came from black people, or that they were pretending that either the attacks were not happening at all, or that somehow, because we were privileged and anti-black, it was totally fine.
I went to a liquor store. I picked up 2 mid-priced bottles of wine. I had glasses and I had a mask on. I had to give the cashier my ID. And up until giving the cashier my ID, I had absolutely no issues. And after I gave the cashier my ID, they proceeded to be extremely rude to me for the rest of my time there, and I quickly left. The biggest issue was the last name that was seen on my ID.
I've seen people move away from people who were Asian on the subway. That's ridiculous. Or also try to cough on you, or stay away from me. And at first I thought fuck them. I'm get more space on the subway. I get more space on the subway. I get more space in general. Fuck you.
And many Asian Americans reported experiencing racism for the first time. And it's, if you had heeded anything I have said today, you know that racism in America has always existed. But I would say to those same people that they experienced racism for the first time that you are being willfully ignorant by staying in your own bubble.
I was picking up medicine at Kaiser Permanente, had a little bit of a cold, as I usually do during this time of year, and I just kind of did the whole the whole mousy kind of sneeze, and this elderly white woman behind me just gave me like this look of death, and I've never seen anyone give me the look of death at the pharmacy.
The first person I knew that it happened to was my own fiance. She got off quote unquote lucky because a bunch of folks only called her racial slurs, right? They didn't hit her or anything, but it still sucks. And at that time, people were getting stabbed, people were being clubbed, people were getting jumped, and nobody cared.
Oh, I had somebody who is a blue check cloud chaser constantly tried to diminish anti-Asian attacks. Even when it happened, he would continuously try to do that. After the attack on the violinist, where he temporarily lost function in his hands, which he needs those for his work, he didn't really care.
I brought this up to this one person I knew since childhood. They were very, very vocal and adamant about social justice, and they made sure that you knew they were passionate about it. And I brought up my concerns that listen, if they're gonna just use this to pit Asian Americans against other marginalized groups, this is really horrible for the long run. This is gonna cause a lot of Asian Americans to hate other marginalized groups because they're gonna assume, because of the dynamics, that hatred was the only path to survival. I hope that they will understand, just given how long we knew each other and because they were also Chinese American, but instead I was told that I needed to understand more about my privilege. I needed to understand what the mono minority was.
People are generally stupid.
I had just lost my best friend who I started DCC with. I was recovering from that. We were still trying to process the fact that we Asian Americans were under attack by folks of all different groups, while nobody cared. And suddenly, we were called to support another movement. And unfortunately, a lot of people who called us to do that were also the same people who silenced us. I did it anyways, to whatever capacity I could, which was limited because I was not in the right headspace.
In spite of all that, it was my job to always extend solidarity and to always show support to marginalized groups.
For my training partners, for my gym, who have encountered their own forms of racism. I did it for my schoolmates, who were seen as less than human despite the fact that they worked so hard to excel to be where they were today.
To honor nuance, to honor where there's a lot of discomfort. But for me, it's a no-brainer.
It was just injustice, or racism is racism. This was unconditional.
Regarding George Floyd, I took this moment just to have a seat and just listen to Black voices.
My boss and coach, Rocky Harris, did this fundraiser, which I had my team do their best to support her with.
I also took this moment to support and promote Black artists.
I silently organized and oversaw the safety of local Black Lives Matter groups in Uptown Manhattan and the Bronx.
It was like, some people don't want to be political, but it's not political to fight for your friends. It's not political to fight for your family. It's not political to fight and speak up for what is right. That was something that I took to heart, and I still do for the rest of my life. And that was, I think, the first moment where I found the words to express myself.
With the help of my friends and me, we had a white supremacist fired from his job after he attempted to use his car to run over young Black and brown folks in the Dykeman area where I was raised as a young child.
I believe my turning point was last year, February 2021, when Love Live of an Asian Dude decided to share this post mentioning that Asians should all take a back seat when it comes to anti-Asian American violence, anti-Asian violence, and focus more on the violence happening to Black folks. And I'm like, wait, you can you can speak up against both things. Why should we have to choose one or the other? And I felt like this post was just making me choose one or the other. Like, of course I want to see the survival of our people, of course I want to support Black folks as well, but I also feel that like it's very important to just elevate both of them. Like, I didn't like that this influencer was saying like, oh, we have to choose one thing over another thing. And seeing this post go viral among my friend circle and identifying who the boba liberals are in my friend circle, that just made me really upset. And I just got so tired just like taking a back seat.
A friend in a schoolmate named Radwa, who also presented for the school, for her community during the Black Lives Movement. Very inspiring, and I thought I would never be up there. One day she found out what I had been covertly doing for 6 months without telling anyone else. Because I thought I was like that's life, and she made me realize, from her reaction, that the world that is silent about what we go through is unacceptable.
When it started trending, I thought, wow, we're finally getting support. People are looking at eyeballs. And what I felt was that, yes, people are now seeing that what we're suffering, but it took a massacre to happen. And even then, it wasn't really accepted as anti-Asian, but there was some sort of double-edged sword with anything regarding racial discrimination, whether it's Black, Latino, or Asian now. There are many people that seek to misunderstand and spread these misunderstandings and spread these misrepresentations of what we're going through, or outright denying it because it's more convenient to them.
The attacks had changed. Now they were including weapons on the street as well.
You had folks going like, well, is it a hate crime? Here's a problem with the word hate. And they're doing this to people who are dying. They're doing this to people who have struggled for so long to find the words to express their ideas.
Still disappointed to see how our experiences and what we were even just going through on the streets were being so invalidated by a lot of people, and even people that I thought would support us.
I saw this elderly man named Yao Pan Ma, who was confused for, I think, Korean or Japanese, get hit and then repeatedly stomped in the head. And not only did that not capture, not only did people not hear about it, you had folks with big platforms going like, this is tragic, but the carceral state, policing, is not the solution. And then they would suck up all this space, have you read this long article about like these solutions, which I am not against, but literally take forever to implement.
Something that we've all had to live with our entire lives. It's constantly being questioned.
That's the fucking point. There was no discussion about immediate safety concerns or possible solutions for that. And they didn't even bother to mention the victim's name. They didn't even bother to mention ways to help the victim's family or that community until they were called out on it.
Was finally getting my second dose, and I told him, listen, I'm scared that I might get attacked. And he was like, yeah, I've had 2 friends who've faced the same thing. Of course, it was with the assertion that hopefully racism will go away.
The hate crimes bill was passed, putting more resources into the Asian community, and it isn't something I have seen or felt as any type of improvement in my local community, and haven't seen any benefit from that bill directly.
I hope that you can begin to understand that what happened between January, February of 2021 through May of 2021 was only the beginning.
Experts on race, particularly anti-Asian racism, who would say things like, you're just these violent, individual violent situations are just an exaggeration. I'm not playing Oppression Olympics, but others have it worse.
Their back of the car and my back of the car lightly tapped each other. Oh, yeah. The white 20-something driver and their passenger step out of their vehicle, and they were, I just can't forget the stance that they had.
Most of my trainees who have stopped their own attacks, that has happened after May of 2021.
I did have my pepper spray on me. At the time, I was not carrying a tact light.
I have had to intervene in targeted attacks towards 2 elderly Chinese men.
What ended up happening was I just kind of just long gamed it and just wait for them to de-escalate and wait for them to calm the F down.
Some guy was approaching my grandmother and 2 other elders while they were shopping, and he had this huge knife with his handle, with like the wooden handle sticking out of the pocket. Literally, that was my introduction to June of 2021, and I had to I had the tactical pen clipped here, so I looked at him, I quickly reached for it, just to let him know that I had something to stab him with, and he backed away.
I've had other Filipinos tell me, well, we're not Chinese, we're not East Asian, we're not Korean or Japanese, so nothing is going to happen. And unfortunately, it actually did happen to 2 Filipinos who were both frontliners. They were both nurses, and that is really shocking.
After May of 2021, it became extremely clear that we would not be heard, and that even our anti-Asian racism was simply a trend.
Well, it wasn't sexy anymore.
I've had to do a lot in the last 2 years to keep other people alive. Currently, I still run my little training group. I've been fundraising for safety gear.
I joined Dragon Combat Club. I did it as a way to get fit, but I did it as a way to get fit. I like keeping myself active. I like trying different things, and martial arts was something that I really wanted to try. And I've always wanted to train with my friends, Henry.
I've had to make sure that I am not only mentally but physically equipped enough to go outside and make sure that I am prepared to protect myself and others. And I've had to make sure to spread this information that I've learned through self-defense and through Dragon Combat Club, through my family and my friends, which is something I thought that I would never have had to do, just for us to feel safe enough going outside.
I've turned to the community. I have never felt as closely connected to Asians as I have since the very beginning of 2021. I have been able to fundraise for Asian-led organizations.
And through DCC, I've also been able to cope through finding a space where I feel validated as an Asian American.
Even though I have trained martial arts of various forms, Thai boxing, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, I've competed in the latter two on and off for the last 10 years, I still leave my house equipped. And my fiance and I, we both leave our house with these tools. Right here, that's your flashlight.
When I had to go back to work in June of 2020, I was scared. I was scared of going in the subway. I was scared of even walking beyond my neighborhood or going on the LIRR because of what was happening, and just learning all of these techniques and also trying to help with those mass training events. It really showed me that, yeah, I can do so many things. I can, my body is able to do this skill, even if it's not perfect. And that, yeah, I do have some sort of control. maybe in the heat of the moment, I might get hurt or I might get injured, but I'm not gonna die.
And then I started looking into my own personal experiences of what could be used as a force multiplier.
Second one, pepper spray. Pen as well. I like to call it the New York Starter Kit. This isn't for something that might happen or maybe sensationalized or exaggerated. My fiance and I have had to stop 7 different attacks in 2021.
Meditation exercises continue to affirm to myself that I and my friends and people who look like me are worthy of respect, and we deserve to be safe wherever we go.
I started off the pandemic as Sarah Connor from Terminator 1, and now I'm Sarah Connor, Terminator 2, guns a-blazing, just ready to fight when I can. And I won't shut up about the machine that is anti-Asian racism. And
I kind of realized that one thing I learned is to not take any stock into institutions anymore.
Someone who has had to unlearn the racism that my parents have taught me as a child. I was always a witness to it my whole life, and it frustrated me whenever I wasn't able to do anything to stand up for my friends growing up.
Befriended, I've met folks who, not just Asian Americans, but also non-Asians, that I'm not just proud and happy to consider friends, but almost like family. People who understand us better than those who are supposed to represent us.
The work that I continue to do to this day is very important because I consider the folks that I work with as my chosen family that I would do anything for.
you want resources, mental health providers. Even as a school counselor, I don't know the answer to this one, but pepper spray.
What kind of supports do we all need? Well, you know what? We could use more money for our safety gear.
We owe it to them to amplify their voices and experiences, from in-person conversations to social media and tangible actions without any violent animosity from anyone.
Just being able to identify mental health organizations that are supportive of Asian Americans.
Fund our local AAPI movements and self-defense programs, and push for AAPI history to be taught in schools in New York State and the rest of the United States.
Biggest thing I could recommend is grief counseling.
I really think schools should start implementing Asian American studies in their curriculum, whether it's talking about it in history classes, American history classes, including it in English classes for required reading.
I also have a book called Grappling to Survive that is coming out that I'm dedicating to my friend Rodwell. However, that book is absolutely not for children.
And not just read these books about the Asian American experience, but to be able to discuss it, to be able to have critical thinking skills, and being able to know the context of that.
It is a story that forces you to ask yourself, are you enabling white supremacy, even when you believe you're fighting against it?
And it just makes me sad that, again, Asians are always deleted from these conversations, from these studies. And I think it's high time we need to include Asian Americans as part of our culture.
For anyone that has used the words model minority and Asian all in one sentence, if myth isn't included in there, you are buying into a myth.
I have made a promise to defend the lives of the community that I serve and the people I love and care for.
Just a guy trying to make the world a safer and better place for people like my fiance, mom, and my grandma.
By watching out for folks who are vulnerable and may be targeted at any moment, while empowering my AAPI friends and family to see this fight through.
And I'm going to make sure that the folks who fought for us, who gave us our voice back, are seen as human beings, regardless of whether they look like us or not.
And I intend on doing so until God calls me home. Thank you for listening.